What else? Another comment? Okay, so welcome to our 2-day retreat entitled 3 Dan Tiens and 7 Chakras. And you will hear me pronounce this as chakras, not chakras, because I'll tell you why as we go. That's the best I can do with the original Sanskrit pronunciation. And we'll learn about that later. But 3 dantians and 7 chakras, what does that refer to? It refers to power centers in the body, power centers in the body. So what we're going to do this morning is we're going to do a bit of an orientation, just for a moment here, introduction orientation. Then we're going to do some practice, and our morning, in case you didn't get a chance to look in that product page, is we're working on the Dan Tien portion and practices associated with that. And then in our afternoon session and tomorrow, we'll get into the 7 chakra system, So the purposes for this class, there are a few. Well, one, this is going to be most likely a practice heavy retreat. We'll be doing some heady talky chit chat, but there are a number of practices that I would love to share with you because they're really quite valuable. And so that's the first priority, is just to share those things with you. And also, when you take 2 days and dedicate it towards something like this, or however much time you can be here, this is 2022, y'all. You're out there like fighting climate change and pulling weeds and feeding goats and, doing anti-racism trainings and calling people in Missouri and telling them how to register to vote. You're doing all kinds of shit. So however much you can be here is great. But when you make that little container, then it has a cumulative transformative effect that doesn't often happen when you're not able to make that kind of container. And even on the internet, like doing practices together is neat. It's neat that way somehow. So that's another of the priorities, is just to have this sort of alchemical cauldron where we can rely on each other a bit to raise things up to where they might not get to otherwise, Okay. And then for my Qigong 2 instructors, this is a requirement to your training. It's one of the last requirements. Most of you have finished most of the other requirements. And the reason for that is this is the language of the subtle body. So that's another key phrase if you're taking notes or taking them later that you might want in there, is to think about the type of work that we're going to do in this course as studying the language of the subtle body, And this is really pretty groovy because, so subheadings under language of subtle body, just for your outlining purposes, because one of my goals as a Qigong instructor and a trainer of trainers, excuse me, is to give you what they call Qigong eyes, right? Or in the martial arts systems, they would say Kung Fu eyes. And that's when you learn like traditional Kung Fu forms, you're doing all of these fancy things with your body. And it's only people who have had the proper transmissions who know how those fancy things with their body translate into actual martial arts, right? Or in the Qigong forms, why one of the things that you'll notice out in the world is there are a couple of different schools who do those Taoist 5 yin organ exercises, which is one of our core sets. And some of them will do it with their fingers out like this when they do that lung exercise. And some of them will do it with their little hands tucked in like this when they do that lung exercise. And what I want to help train you in is to avert the impulse to go, well, which one's right? and to cultivate the impulse to go, huh, how does that work? How does that work? And so the language of the three Dan Tiens and chakras in general, I put 7 chakras specifically in the title because there are a number of different formulations of that, and we're going to use the 7 chakra system. We actually have to slim it down, or else Sifu Longwind will be long-winded just telling you about the difference between the 7 and the 5 and all of that. So but the idea is that this language of power centers in your body is a poetry of subtle practices. It's a poetry of subtle practices. And what's neat is that many of the ancient cultures around the world have some practice like this. Why? Well, because the ancient cultures of the world were, you could say, perhaps more aligned with the subtle than our modern materialist consumerist culture is. And that's not necessarily better or worse. It's just a little more holistic. If you think about it, the first 200 to 500,000 years of our human history was pre-literate. And we learned through stories and through songs and through listening to landscapes and to feeling the vibes in the earth and stuff like that. And this is a whole type of learning and engagement that human beings are wired up for. And then starting about 10,000 years ago, we started to develop like fundamentalist religious traditions, and then writing, and then owning people and animals and such. And there are whole other types of knowing in there, which, despite the nefarious uses they get put to, they're very valuable types of knowing. But we've made the mistake sometimes of losing that more primary type of knowing in a human system. And so that's what gets preserved in yogic tradition, in Qigong tradition, which are all attempting to work with this subtle aspect of our being. So we're learning the poetry of the subtle. And that word poetry is really important because that's kind of how it operates. And let's just say this right now, the reason why in Taoist tradition, for example, you'll hear much more about the 3 Dan Tiens in Taoist tradition than you will about the 7 or however many chakras, right? You will occasionally, I don't know if you'll hear about them under that name, but there are practices with these same chakras in traditional Taoist lineages. But you'll hear about the Dan Tiens. Well, why? Who's right? No, you got to avert the tendency to ask who's right, because it's poetry, right? So, Lord Byron comes along and he's like, she walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes. And you're like, really, Lord Byron? All that's best? What kind of assay have you done to make sure that there's not some percentage of what is best that is not represented by her aspect and her? No, dude, it's poetry. It's poetry. And so we get it. I mean, that's the only poem I could think of right now off the top of my head. Oh no, wait. Okay. And then Rumi comes along and is like, if you can't wrap this love around you like a cloak at midnight, don't put on something else. Just go back to sleep. You're like, whoa, Rumi. Okay. But there's no real cloak there. Is the midnight's in your soul. But then when we get into Qigong and related disciplines, we tend to go like, oh my gosh, the Japanese locate this acupoint here, but the Koreans locate this acupoint here. Who's right? Dude, it's the subtle body. It's a poem about how consciousness interacts with form. And where consciousness interacts with form, that's what we call subtle, right? So consciousness is like absolute space, form is like absolute embodiment. And then where they dance, the dancing part in the middle, is what I'm referring to as subtle, or chi, or prana, or something like that. Okay, so we're learning poetry of the subtle. Those are a couple of priorities. The other benefits that you might get, one is that a lot of you just went through the full-on Empathy Dojo immersion, the 6-month mastery mind, except it was more like a mastery heart. So our master heart meetings, and one of the ideas is to train you actually in how to be a good coach for folks. A very like a non-hierarchical version of coaching one another, based on eliciting intrinsic wisdom and compassion from ourselves. And one of the things that will come up as you practice, I mean, I imagine one of you could probably attest, a couple of us could attest to this, where we actually have a professional or clinical practice that isn't necessarily very woo-woo, or based on, we're not speaking to clients about non-evidence-based claims. And yet your intuition in those cases will be a big factor in how effective your work goes, right? So, you're teaching voice lessons to someone, as a couple of you actually might do, right? And maybe that client, like, I know a couple of you guys have some clients who are willing to go full woo with you, but you've probably also got clients who are like, they just need professional guidance on like how to use their pharynx or something like that, right? And so that's the context of the situation. But as you teach them, back in your mind, it'll go like, nope, you got to tell them to sing from the pelvic floor. You're like, the pelvic floor, like, can I just say diaphragm? Nope, it's pelvic floor for this one. And when you tell them, their whole system will open up, or they'll get access to this traumatic thing that they now can go get counseling for because they know it's there, or whatever it is. And so similarly, in other disciplines, you'll find that feeling in your own body, these power centers, where they are and what they do, the more familiar you are with these in your own practice, the more that lights up in how you help others, whether that's in like an intuitive healing arts context, or even just in your daily life. So this is fun, especially for you Empathy Dojo facilitators, but that's also part of our Qigong 2 training, is that in order to help coach people well, we want an intuition of how these centers work, and when they're going to be blocked, or when they're going to be too open, or all of these various things. Because like one of the main places where I use this is that people will come to me for medical Qigong who need help because they've blown themselves out with spiritual practice, the wrong kind of spiritual practice, or too much, or something like that. I have great personal experience in this, and so I can help. And often what will happen is that because of some theory that we've been taught, that it's important to like blast off and open up these things up here, they've done that at the expense of these power centers lower down that represent more of our embodiment. And so being able to kind of feel that, and like to feel like, oh, is this person a third eye person, or are they a crown person? Are they a heart person, or are they what? Where's the block? Is it in the solar plexus? Is it in the tummy? Is it down in the pelvic floor? All of these little sort of specified insights can be really helpful in balancing ourselves out so that we can become full spectrum beings, rather than sort of partial embodiments, or partial embodiments. So if we wanted an overall learning objective for this class, it's being full spectrum beings, being full spectrum beings. Or you could say whatever poem works for you, like being wholehearted. That would be a nice one. How to, be wholehearted. Yes. Okay, and then there was one more thing that I wanted to tell you. Those are our learning objectives. Oh yes, the last learning objective, or the last thing I want to tell you on this, maybe, what is it, like an anti-learning objective? I don't know. Anyway, I am not a guru, I said in my Guru Wizard of Oz voice. What do I mean? I mean, anybody can show up as a guru for another, because we can all be transmitters of the sacred. But what I mean by that is I don't have personal experience of like these like vastly world transcending, like which chakra is a gate to the angelic realms if you do some kind of certain sigil about it or something like that. That stuff may be the case, but I am not here to teach you about it. In my case, when I was like, I don't know, 18 or something like that, from the used shelf at the metaphysical store, I found a great book on the chakras, and I started playing with all that stuff, and I was like, wow, this really helps my life. And then I went to massage school and I took an energy work class, and they did this chakra energy work sequence. I'm like, wow, this really helps my life. And then later on, I learned a transformational breathwork system that went through these chakras. Oh, that really helped my life. And then I went to medical qigong school, and we learned a chakra healing thing, and that really helped my life and the lives of others. And so what I can tell you, hopefully in this class, is actually quite a grounded, experiential view of how to use psycho-emotional power centers in your body as a poetry of the subtle for fun and profit, or for better relationships and health, or something like that. So hopefully you didn't come to this class thinking that I was like, okay, now at the end of this, you'll have an opportunity to make a bigger donation, and then I'll teach you the real secrets of how to transcend all of your boundaries in service to, sorry, my partner's been watching cult documentaries like a lot lately, so I've picked up a few tricks to never use. But I wanted to mention this because there's definitely, like, if you say a word like chakra, there's definitely this possibility for cultural appropriation that comes online. There's a possibility for spiritual bypassing that comes online. There's a possibility to just go wild, because when you deal with things that are in interior realms, you're dealing with something that's invisible. And so it gives us the chance to develop this very solipsistic. Do you know that word, solipsistic? It's one of your best. Okay, let me put it in the chat box. Solipsistic. Yeah. Okay, so, and then we'll get into some chi practices, but let me do vocabulary real quick, please, because it makes me happy. So I think philosophically, this can be actually an extreme philosophical view where, like, you think you're the only person in the universe who exists, like literally. Man, that's not a fun existential crisis. 1 out of 10 do not recommend. But in sort of more common usage, it refers to kind of like a type of narcissism or something, where you take your experiences of these chakras, or you take like your inner experience, and you disregard shared experience, or you disregard observable experience. And this is where it can get kind of dangerous for spiritual bypassing, because you see a light, you're meditating on this center, and you go, oh shoot, I saw a light. And it's really easy for some folks to go straight into the Messiah complex from there. Like, you saw a light one day in meditation. And so in traditional schools, they had all this stuff like you're never allowed to tell your spiritual experiences to anybody but your mentor. And this is a great safeguard because often they go, oh, cool, you saw a light. Well, let's see how your mental afflictions are this week. And if the post-digestive effect of seeing that light doesn't free you from being an asshole, then you're not the Messiah yet, right? Or you saw, you'll go to the guru, oh, you saw that light, cool. Did you see the white one, the blue one, or the red one? And the student's like, oh, well, I only saw the shimmery silverish one. Oh, okay, cool. Well, keep practicing. But we have this opportunity. It's really easy in spiritual practices. And I just like to speak to it, especially, like I'm teaching a class on chakras in the time of catastrophic climate change. And I would like this class to be a contribution to the reversal of catastrophic climate change. And that means we have to be very aware of how we use spiritual techniques and technology to separate ourselves from others rather than to forge greater connections. And so when we're working with the interior and the invisible, it's very easy to take that and like enshrine it without access to other experiences or contradictory points of view. And I want to be very cautious of that so that I can feel ethical about talking about this super mystical schmystical stuff that came from India, and then great white colonizers came over and they like packaged it up and they sold it to us in yoga coaching programs, and and that's where the chakras come from, boys and girls. I want to make sure that we're doing something a little more ethical than that, and that means not starting with delusions of grandeur. So then, as we'll learn through our practice, through the trajectory of our practice, is if we start in that grounded place without delusions of grandeur, sometime during this weekend, you may have vast visions of unity, and you may have holotropic heartbreak that opens you up to the great tragedy of all existence, and yet the beauty that you have to contribute, like the specific song poem that emerges spontaneously from your soul. Like you might feel all of that, and yet you could feel it without delusions of grandeur. And it would be a real heart chakra opening, because it would be an opening beyond the self rather than a compaction of the self through the misuse of spiritual technology. I know a lot about that too from personal experience. And so I am the perfect person to teach that class. Oh yeah, yesterday's enlightenment experience is tomorrow's ego trip. So it's valuable to know, right? And this is traditionally why they say, well, don't go take those powerful drugs unless you've got a real shaman on your hands. And then that's tricky, because some of those real shamans, they've got the outfit, they've got the elephant, but they're also just there to pull one over on you. And so I think in this age, we want to look at like, well, what is it that makes a practice authentic? Or what are the key practices? What are the key ingredients in there? And that thing is that usually, you go on your journey, you have these amazing insights, and then somebody's there at the end to go like, yeah, we've all had that insight. Like, it doesn't mean you now get to go start a business about it. Like, talk to me in 40 years. Like, let life throw you on the mat a few more times and see how your insight holds up. And then let's talk about you being the next great shaman who brings the tradition forward. Okay. So that's your intro. Hopefully, what do you think? Let's hear some talkbacks about that intro. Anything I missed? Anything you want to disagree with at this point? Anything that should be on that list that I forgot to put in there? What say thee? Stupefied? Are we stupefied? Okay, cool. Yes, Miko.
I'm a little stupefied, but it's for other reasons.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, I love this introduction, and so grateful for all of this and the way that you present it. And outside of this, I just wanted to share that I think I'm getting well, I know I was exposed to strep throat, and I can feel my immune system fighting, and so I was wondering like how I'm a little votted out because I'm just drinking a lot of juices and taking a lot of herbs and stuff for my immune system. And I mostly feel fine, but I can feel that it's fighting something, and wanted to check in about the practices, about the safety of those practices for me as we go along, while being in that position.
Yeah, that's a good question. These are not especially tonifying practices. So that's generally the rule in Qigong, is that if there is an invading pathogen, you don't drive it in deeper by tonifying the system. Yeah, so some of what we'll be doing is more like meditation. Meditation's not particularly contraindicated. So I would say you're safe to give it a try and then just see how you feel. And then if it doesn't feel right to you, then you do yoga nidra and you just sort of listen and vibe. And, you know, you do that old mystical thing of like, oh, you're getting the transmission anyway, by napping in class. And that will be good. Yeah. And if you're all vated out, definitely put your feet in the bath water or something while you listen to the talk. That'll help you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, welcome. All right, Carla, what do you say? Oh, you're muted. Yeah, there you go.
I just wanted to thank you for creating that safe space, and acknowledging that you talked about the elephant in the room sometimes. So with some, not yours, but some practices. So thank you.
There can be a lot of elephants in these practices. Oh, good. I'm glad that came across as safety. I think I wanted that reassurance, because I have a rant in me that I've had to give on this stuff. And who better to give it to than like teachers? You're all leaders and teachers and healers, and so we kind of need to do these rants together. So I appreciate that it landed that way for you, because it's all about creating safety. And especially because this is a class in my certification training for the intermediate level teachers, I really want to make sure that y'all are not going out there and perpetuating the more harmful parts of these practices, or the way that they can go sideways when we like colonize them. So yeah, so it's important. Okay, Jim, what do you say?
Well, for that very reason, I held off doing a lot of instruction for quite some time. I did the instruction last year, and just recently, in the last 2 months, I've started doing weekly Qigong classes with people. And there's a great, vast absence of knowledge out there.
Yeah.
Especially with this.
Yeah.
It's the mystical tradition. I've noticed I have to be very careful about what I share. Because I don't have a ton of experience sharing that. As a therapist, I help people all the time with their mental afflictions. But when I come to Qigong, I found that, especially in the class I teach, which is mostly elderly people, I keep it very simple. And but I have noticed within the instructor community here, there's this vast lack of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And what that is, we have yoga teachers that will do brew in yoga. They will do a beer and yoga class. And I have another, and then another yoga teacher will be, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing a beer and yoga class.
Right.
And so we get these vast, and we actually have a segmenting of these instructors. It's cool that, and as Qigong, it is I'm out of that yoga thing. I'm not a yoga instructor.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's territory.
Yeah.
There's territory. And if you step on someone's toes, you might not get spoken to for 6 months. And so there's a lot of, I guess what I want to say is I've noticed there's a lot of ego involved with other instructors.
Yeah.
And, as an innocent, and I like to think I am an innocent in this, I want to share this knowledge. I get excited about sharing it, but I notice I lose people when I start to overshare, perhaps.
Great.
About the power centers.
Oh, that's what a great self-knowing. Yeah, I used to play with a kirtanwala back when I was in Massachusetts, and he was this cool old jazz guitarist turned kirtanista. Excuse me, I got to clear my throat. And he would start talking story, and then he would stop himself eventually. And he shared a story once where his guru was in town, and he led the kirtan, and her feedback afterwards was, talk less, sing more. And for us as Qigong, I try to balance it, give me some feedback later. I try to balance it in these classes because I'm here supposed to be teaching and transmitting a bunch of theory and stuff like that too. But in our weekly classes that we might give, the practice itself is the transmission. And one of the coolest things is that it's less about what experience people are supposed to have or could have or might have or create, and more about what experience comes up endogenously, right? And so, and this is one of the neat things about yoga in the modern age, is that it can be like a church for people, because when you get to that shavasana at the end, you're actually having bliss-filled, meditative, spiritual experiences. But your teacher didn't, sometimes the teacher does, but the teacher didn't have to say, now this is downward dog and we're prostrating to Krishna. It's like, oh, we don't believe in Krishna necessarily, but you can do a downward dog and experience intrinsic bliss. And, and the practice itself is sacred. So that's one lesson for us, is talk less, sing more. And, the understanding of our chakras is really valuable, because sometimes when our heart gets aflame with enthusiasm, and the throat chakra widens out, and then this third eye center widens out, and the relational center down here in the tummy is totally offline. And so we don't realize that because we're feeling blissful doesn't mean we're at all connected or in service. And so this is one of those knowings we'll get into as we go. But you can blast these suckers open and they feel really good and they feel like truth, but they're not a full spectrum human experience. And so thus, we might be sacrificing our relationships for our bhakti yoga vibes. And it's oh, so that's one of those practical notes, and what I'm saying, here's my learning objectives, practical, jujitsu with my spiritual life for the last 30 years and the tools that some folks, some good spiritual jujitsu coaches have passed on, is that's one of those, is like having the feeling of this, being totally open and vibing. Okay, to be Zen about it, it's like, well, that doesn't mean shit. You know, did you do your dishes? And did you enjoy it? How's your voter registration? Like, what's the status on that? Like, and so those are down. Voter registrations like in the solar plexus, and doing the dishes is all the way down in your pelvic floor. And if we can't sustain that whole thing, then aspects of our life or our being are going to suffer. And that's kind of a bummer, because we're coming partially. So anyway, in terms of teaching, I really took in talk less, sing more, and let people have the experience they're going to have without putting my experience onto it. And the other piece, which is fun, is that sectarianism in our yoga traditions, that's exactly the who's right game that, you know, my main mission has been to try to inoculate us against. This is an inoculation y'all don't have to refuse. There's no nanoparticles in it. There's not even any nanny particles in it. It's actually it's the opposite of nana particles. So, but it's really interesting because, in my experience at least, you know, it's easy to be fundamentalist as a human. It's easy to be territorial. In Buddhism, they actually consider that the animal realm. That's when you're being territorial like that, you're living in the animal realm. And their philosophy says that's a quick road to getting reincarnated into that realm, which could be a real bummer. Because there's no guarantee that you're gonna like be the purebred white lady's dog. You know, so but what's interesting is, if we educate ourselves a bit, we start to learn really interesting things, that like yoga as a term is really old in Indian philosophy, right? It's back there in the Vedas, like related to like religious sacrifices and stuff like that. But nobody practices that kind of yoga except for like diehard caste system folks, where there's like Brahmins and outcasts and stuff. You have to have a priestly caste to be able to do those rituals that are called yoga in there. So what we tend to call yoga is, you know, going through the asanas and like singing to God and stuff like that. And if you start to study a little bit, you realize that, whoa, the singing to God thing, like that didn't come online until a couple hundred years ago. Before, there were these prescribed mantras, you know, for doing these ritual activities. And then this thing where you get together and like you sing to Shiva and Krishna and Radha and all these folks in the same set with groovy music, like that's recent. That's hella recent, you know, but we've put that together with posture practice. And then the posture practice, it's hard to say what the history says now, but one piece of the history is that during British colonial rule, people were getting into the trend of what is it called? This Swedish gymnastic trend, which was, you know, working out with weights and stuff like that. And there was a whole piece where some folks felt that that was going to erode the pride in Indian culture and exalt the culture of the colonizers. And so they said, well, can't we have our own like native physical culture thing? And they took, now this may be outdated, but I did read this from a historian. I'll see if I can find the reference for you later. But they took classic yoga texts like the Gyaran Samhita and the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and they mixed it with doing burpees and gymnastic stretches. And that's where you get the Hatha Yoga tradition of modern times. Okay, so that's cool. So, but it's only in modern times that we've taken that and we've gone like, hey, if you don't sing Shiva Shambho and Radhe Shyam every Thursday night, you're not really doing yoga, right? You'll hear this in the colonizer yoga community. And then you'll hear it in like anti-colonizer yoga community online, who also happen to be white people, who speak the loudest. And they'll be like, oh, who's doing it right? Who's doing it right? It's like, no, dude, the thing you're proposing as right is an amalgam of some stuff that's 300 years old and then some other stuff that's 100 years old. It's mixed from these various forces, right? And one of the interesting things is that then the historical postural yoga, the texts that they're drawing that from, likely come out of a tradition where they would meet on certain phases of the moon and get really drunk and then dance their way through sacred postures in a very, very sexy way and have a feast where outcasts and merchants and everybody was invited. And it was a no judgment feast. And so there's actually historical precedent for beer yoga and weed yoga. I'm not recommending this personally. Let me be clear. But if we were to talk about like who's right historically, the idea, the Parvrita Parsvakonasa, stuff comes out of a tradition that grew out of these goddess cults that were very Dionysian in nature. And so it brings up this whole, like, if we're going to be sectarian, we have to go like, oh, okay, this one's not the real yoga. Well, what source are you defining yoga from? Is it from a Veda? Is it from a Upanishad? Is it from a Tantra? And if it's from a Tantra, then beer might be required. like that some of those tantrics would be like, hey, if you're not drunk, you're not doing yoga. And if you're in who's right, which we could call a materialist consumerist orientation or a gross identification, then those kind of distinctions make sense, right? But to get ourselves into a subtle and causal orientation, and then non-dual, that's the worldview of the yoga tradition that I've inherited. Can't say I've mastered, but know enough about it to talk about it. Is this down here is like, this is this and that is that. And then this up here is like, whoa, how did that and this interrelate? And then once you get to causal, it's like, well, nothing's anything. And then once you get to non-dual, it's everything is everything. And it helps you get back to the bottom. So anyway, thanks for that. I am now going to probably stop with so much of the talking and we'll move into practice. Hundreds of chakras in the Vedic system. We could look at that for sure. There's definitely nadis and chakras, but yeah, we'll define chakras specifically for how we're going to work with them. And yeah, I don't know specifically, I'm not a big Vedic scholar. I know my few yogic texts, later tantric texts, like from the 14th century and beyond. And so I use that definition of chakra, but we could certainly take a look. Okay, so before we go on, complaints, corrections, or requests. This is just what I'm trying to learn how to ask in the seat of the teacher. Okay, good fun. So let us take a little break. Well, that'll be nice. Why not? So let's do a 10-minute break in case you need to brew a cup of tea, if you need to go to the potty. And then when we come back, it'll be a very short talking piece to say, this is what Dan Tiens are. And then we'll do that practice, which is one of the practices I'd like you to receive this weekend, is a 3 Dan Tien practice. And then we'll go from there. So it is now 11:24 on my clock. So let's come back at 30, 31, 33. Let's come back at 33 after the hour. I will see you then. All right, so welcome back from break. We are about to do a practice on the 3 Dan Tiens, And any just remaining questions or complaints from our last thing, just to wrap that up. This is part of me attempting to be more lateral in my teaching rather than unilateral. So just do let me know, or feel free, if I really screwed up and you're being kind to me, then let me know through a personal message later using all of your nonviolent communication skills. Por favor, like if you need to correct me, that's the time to use the best NVC you've ever done in your life, because I need that. Thanks for helping. Okay. So we are back, and we are going to talk about briefly, and then we're going to practice about extensively, los tres Dan Tiens. So just a quick review or an intro. I don't think anyone is that fresh on here to have never heard about it, but Dan Tien is, oh, maybe I can do I still remember how to draw this? I think I can whiteboard this for you. This is going to be fun. Where is it? Where's our whiteboard? Just brief intro. Okay. So Dan, I don't know which tone this is, I'm sorry, is a picture of a little cauldron with a drop of elixir in it. Okay, so this is an ancient Chinese picture. This is like this is the tripod of an alchemical cauldron, right? It looks like a bipod, but it's because, you know, three-dimensional drawing was not developed when the Hansel were first created, right? Like hieroglyphs, you know. Okay, and then this is like the little tray that will hold the medicine you're making inside your alchemical container. And then, oh, boop, there's your medicine. So that's done. And this word, Dan, that's my buddy Dan. Okay, this, tell that to your pronunciation critics, Jim. This word means like an elixir. An elixir is the way we translate that nowadays. And it's a good translation because there are, this is actually used in Chinese medicine. Sometimes Kat will know that most of the time a pill is called a wan, which means a pill, right? Actually, a point that we'll talk about later in the subtle body in Taoism in here is called the niwan. And it's got an, okay, tangent alert, but not very long. It's got an interesting etymology because ni means mud, I think, in this case, and then wan means pill. And the myth was that the creator, these sacred dragon creator deities, formed humans by rolling up a little ball of mud and then breathing sacred breath on it. And that's where peoples came from. And this is the mud ball palace. But the other etymology, just to finish the story, is that it's a Chineseification of the word nirvana. And both of those have meanings we could talk about later in the alchemical tradition. Anyway, all that was to say is that pills are usually called wan, right? So like free and easy wanderer pill, Xiao Yao San Wan, free and easy wanderer powder pill, right? Or etc. That's the only one I could think of. Then occasionally, though, something in a little pill form will be called Dan Tian Wang Bu Xin Dan. And the Dan there means it's like super magic pill. Super magic pill. It's not just a wand. It's not just a ball of medicine. It's an elixir. And you, just so you know, you sound more pretentious if you say elixir rather than elixir. So just in case you want your pretentious points to go up, do that. Okay, so that's done. And then Tian, oh, I got to pick my drawing thing. Tian is a picture like this, except drawn better. And this is a divided farmland or a field prepared for cultivation. Field prepared for cultivation. Okay, so so you can see this is, you know, it's an enclosed space. And it's got, okay, over here we got cover crops. Yeah, that's fava beans. It's going to be really great, but we got to let it lie fallow for a minute. And then over here we're growing oats for the horses, but then the oat straw, it's going to do this. And over here we got alfalfa. It's part of a soil regeneration project that we're doing. And this is where we've got this is actually zone 1. My house is over here, and this is where we're growing our food crops this year. You know, it's a slow start, but permaculture says it takes 7 years to really get the thing rolling. And so that's what Tian means. That whole spiel I just gave you, we're going to excerpt that out. And if you're like, what is the Tian and Dan Tiens? Oh, well, listen to my seafood talk permaculture in a bro accent. So when you put them together, you have the prepared cultivation ground space of a super magical elixir. The prepared cultivation ground space of a super magical elixir, right? And this is what you want to know. I explained that to some of you all before, didn't I? Maybe. Anyway, you got to know this, especially those of you who are going to be Qigong teachers, because this is one of these things in the degradation of a cultural practice as it gets appropriated, is that martial artists have been going around talking about the Dan Tiens for years, and very few of them could actually define it like, what does the Chinese mean? Which is really just kind of the base level. It's not, that part's not to be pretentious. Oh, do you even know what the Chinese characters mean? No, it's just like a base level of, if you're going to do your Qigong as cultural appreciation rather than appropriation, you should know what the words mean. Por favor, right? And let's also give, you know, young white boys like myself who might have been reincarnated from somebody or another, who were doing the best we could, that a lot of these Chinese teachers came over fleeing cultural revolution and began teaching their practices to the degree that they could with language barriers and cultural barriers. And then they did empower those teachers, these white folks, and my teacher was native, you know, from the 60s, and there were probably some folks of color, if they were able to get access. Oh, my teacher's teacher, actually, down in North Hollywood. But anyway, American folks who didn't necessarily speak Chinese were empowered as transmitters of the lineage. That's one of the important points to know. It's not cultural appropriation. It's cultural appropriation if you're speaking as an authority in the lineage when you have not been authorized in the lineage. So these were people who were authorized, but like at the level that was possible for the time. So before I get sectarian and reincarnate in the animal realm right here before your eyes, let's make sure, you know, we distinguish what our responsibility might be versus what responsibility we might place on those from whom we've inherited a real great cultural milieu, the capacity to study beyond our own borders. So are lower Dantian and Hara synonyms? Oh, what a great segue question. So in Japanese, the word is tanden, and it means, it's a Japanese pronunciation of the Chinese word, and it's those same characters, right? If you're writing it in Japanese, the Hanzi went over, and then Japanese also have their own written language, but the classical from adopting Confucian culture is in those same characters, and so that's tanden. And then hara in general tends to refer, as I've been taught, I'm not an expert on this, but I have been taught a few things. Hara in general refers to this whole sort of nexus here of like your guts. So like if you think of a sumo wrestler and they're like, or however they do it, you know, that is some hara power. You. If you think of the image of Happy Buddha, right, who's been mixed with what, Hotai, the god of fortune, that's actually, that's not, that particular Buddha was quite skinny actually, but you know, the big belly Buddha, that's like the hara. And then the Dan Tiens roughly speaking, would be considered this particular energy nexus within that in terms of the lower dantian. But there's also some overlap. And when it gets to that, we can say, why? Because this is poetry, right? So there are two different words in Japanese. Like when I was taught Reiki, long time ago, there are two different techniques. There's hara chiryo, which is healing by placing your hands on the hara. Here's a belly button. Boom. I get your whole tummy with my Reiki hands. And then there's tanden chiryo. Okay, here's the navel. I just get the little tanden, right? And so these are two different techniques. So that's like stretching my knowledge of Japanese alchemical terminology versus Chinese Taoist alchemical terminology. But hopefully that helps a little bit. Okay, and then the other thing that you need to know before we practice is there are 3 Dan Tiens, San Dan Tian, 3 Dan Tian in traditional Taoist alchemy. And these are your head, your heart, and your tummy. Your head, your heart, and your tummy. And this is one of those things where we didn't have that in American Tai Chi and Qigong for a long time, because when the Taiji masters came over, they taught this Dantian, because that's the most important one for martial arts. And then these are for inner alchemical practices, and you would have had to have much more cultural nuance to be able to transmit that. And so we got the one in the belly. And so if you hang out with Tai Chi squads for a while, they'll sometimes say the Dantian, right? And this is also represented somewhat in Taoist alchemy. Technically, in the text, this is the Xia Dantian, the lower Dantian. And then you also have a Zhong Dantian, and you have I forget how to say upper in Chinese, but you have an upper Dantian. So these are the 3 cauldrons of the 3 elixirs of the subtle body. The 3 elixirs, pronounced pretentiously, of the subtle body. And we can discuss that more, but let's do some practice. Shall we? Can we? If not, lay down and don't, but I'll be having fun over here without you. And so I don't want you to feel lonely. Do what's right for your body, mind, spirit today, but let's do some practice. So this is a set that I have taken to calling the 3 Dan Tian Qigong. I'll tell you about its origins later, but that's much easier to say than Ba Gua Shun Dao Gong. So we're going to start with our shaking heaven to earth for a warm-up. So let's shake out those hands. And of course, might as well wake up your inner smile. So either find some actual joy and curiosity, or if not, just make your face pretend and then direct that toward your pause. Like, hey, pause, may you have happiness and the causes of happiness. May you be the pause that refreshes. Little pause. Okay, good. And then continue into your elbows. Let that smile go into your elbows. And then as your intention goes there, it'll change your body movement so that you start to get the body moving a bit with that. And then even into your shoulders. Feel free to sigh, like, I want to sigh. Okay, then gorilla. And then we go backwards and open that chest. We go forward. This is making me want to go see that new Elvis movie so I can learn some new Qigong techniques to do in this shaking heaven to earth. And backwards. You can see all my old Qigong I learned from Jim Morrison. So, okay, and then the tummy, or that whole hara. Move your whole hara. And then pick up a leg and shake a leg. Smile to your hip, your knee, your ankle and your foot, and shake tension out into the earth. Other side, here we go. Hip smiling, knee smiling, ankle smiling, and foot, and shake it loose down to the earth. Way down you go. Let's twist it up. Just lifting the heel on this one so that it's an easy exercise for your knees and for your legs. This lifting the heel gives you a little better kind of overall gallbladder meridian stretch. If you want to learn more about that, you should go back and purchase the Qigong for the spring season course that came out way back in the spring season. Summer season course should be coming out in about a week, and it's going to be really fun. Okay, then come up, give yourself a pat on the back. Look back with your eyeballs. This is also very good for that gallbladder meridian. It's helpful as we start a Qigong practice or a retreat, because the gallbladder is all about making decisions and carrying them out. And so as you want to settle into practice space, you want to give a chance for that energy to just kind of like be acknowledged and like, oh, you've had to do all this stuff, make all these decisions, get here. And now we're going to settle into a meditative mind. Okay, and then toes up, swap the hip. And if you can, look all the way back at your opposite heel. Okay, come to the center. Let's inhale. Three-way stretch forward. Be careful if you need to for your back. Inhale back. Exhale, pull in. Hi. Two more. 1, 2, and 3. Hi. One more time. Hi. Good. Let's pull down heavens 3 times. Inhale. Using that sigh. 2. And 3. Relax down in the Wuji posture. Take a moment just to notice your physical body. Notice your breathing. And notice your mind. And see if you can notice all 3 together. And perhaps even the sense of an energy field that surrounds you and pervades you. And even notice the fact of noticing itself. Good. Then we're going to do the chi ball exercise. So taking your hands out wide, placing the awareness right in the center of your palms, and then staying relaxed. And as you slowly bring toward each other, just noticing for when the sensations in your palms shift. It might feel tingly. It might feel like a magnet pressing apart. Remember, this is subtle. This is actually shifting us into that subtle. So when you find that, then we're going to inhale and expand. Exhale, condense, and just awareness on the palms. Feeling for those sensations. You inhale, expand, like you're bringing energy into that space between your palms. And you exhale and condense. And one more time. And exhale. And let's roll the ball. We'll do a little spontaneous qigong. So just playing, rolling the ball, however it wants to roll. I think we learned this in the Tai Chi course in our level 1 training. So it's a spontaneous qigong, but it has this one parameter, which is just you keep this sense of a ball. And it's as if the chi is moving you however it wants to move you, or even it might move you into stillness. We just keep that one parameter, just rolling the ball, rolling the ball. Slow and smooth. And you'll know you really are starting to get the feeling of spontaneous qigong, or you might be doing something really cool because your body may begin to move in ways that you didn't expect, or which aren't normal for you. Okay, then when you're ready, take about a half a minute. Come back toward that sort of front orientation. Just ask your body and your intuition to bring yourself back to that original position. And then slowly but surely you gather, visualizing like that ball between your hands shrinks down until you can place it inside the body in that lower tummy center. And relax, and again, notice body, breath, and mind. Notice them all together. And notice the noticing itself. It's this spacious awareness in which all of these changes are happening. Okay, then we're going to bring our hands like we're doing the chi ball, but this is now the beginning of our set that we're learning. And this is called La Chi. La means to pull. And so instead of focusing on creating the ball, you're just focusing on the sensation in the hands. So we're going to inhale and expand. And then exhale, coming toward each other. And if you're anything like me or many of us, you'll begin to feel sensations are different as you pull away and then as you come toward one another. If they're not, that's okay. But we just want this sense of really feeling the hands, feeling the hands, feeling the hands. It's exhale as you come closer together. And it's inhale as you begin to spread apart. And it's exhale when you come closer together. And it's inhale when you begin to spread apart. Now, if you've got that focus on your hands, then begin to feel your entire body. And as you do this, you may feel the sense of your entire body or the energy field around you changes as you open and expand and then come back together. So just notice what happens to you as a whole being, as a subtle being. Okay, one more time. Come on in. Then from here, you're going to go palms up, middle fingers pointing right at each other. You inhale to the level of your throat. And you flip the hands over. You exhale and you push off the crown. Nice stretch. And then you're going to open toward heaven. As you inhale, the hands open out. And as you exhale, they pour on in. You inhale, the hands open out. And you exhale, they come on in. And we're not going to visualize or focus on anything at the moment. We'll just do the movement. So it's inhale. But you can keep that sensitivity to your whole body and your whole being. And exhale. Let's do 2 more times here. And 1 more time. Okay, then we're going to expand open. Turn the palms out and you're going to bend the knees as you come down with those big wings. And as you stand back up, you inhale and your wings float up. Exhale as you come down. And notice my breathing getting slower, so it's hard to keep this pace of your breath. Just do what's right for you. Exhaling as you come down. And again, just feeling into that subtle body. Let's do 1 more. And inhale. Now for your next one, there's an easy version and a more challenging version. So let's do the easy version first, which is going to gather down and then it comes toward your Dan Tiens. That's your exhale. So you inhale like you're opening to the earth, just like we did toward heaven. And you exhale. And it gathers toward that Dan Tiens. Let's do 1 more. And it gathers toward that Dan Tiens. Okay, hold that position, please, just for a moment. And I'll demonstrate the next one, which is in a forward fold. So if you try to do it with me, you won't see the exercise. So just stay there and let me demonstrate, and I'll be right back. Don't worry. So at the end of our last bird, what you do is you're going to bring your body flat forward and your hands accordion in like this, and you stay there. You fly your wings up like that. At the end, just in case you won't be able to see me, you bend your knees and you're going to scoop up from the Dan Tiens. So you've got these 2 options. One is just standing, and you're relating to the earth that way. But if you'd like to try the second one, we'll do 3 more of this exercise altogether. So it's bring your body flat. As you exhale, the hands come toward each other. And then you stay in that airplane position as your wings come up. And you exhale and you gather from the earth. 1 more time, inhale. And you exhale. And this time you're going to bend the knees and scoop up. Come to hold the ball at the lower belly. Just standing in meditation for a moment. Enjoy. Okay, let's practice again. So we start with La Chi. So you're going to inhale, the hands expand out. Exhale, they come together, and you're just sensing very strongly feelings in the palms. And perhaps even sensing the whole body. One more time. Then palms up. We inhale up to the height of the collarbones and flip over. Exhale, push off the top of the head. Inhale, opening to the sky. And as you exhale, you imagine like that sky energy pours into the upper Dan Tiens center, which is basically the whole cranial vault. And you're not pushing or forcing or anything like that. You're opening. And then as you gather, you might feel like this celestial energy comes in and awakens, balances, and opens this upper Dan Tiens center of the head. Let's do one more. Hopefully that's 5, but you know, who's counting? Obviously it wasn't me. Okay, palms come out and then turn out. Exhale, come down. And now you want to feel on the horizontal all of nature. As you inhale, it comes in to nourish that heart center, the middle Dan Tian. Exhaling down. Inhale, like all of nature, all the beneficial forces on that horizontal plane. Coming in, awakening and nourishing the center of the chest. Let's inhale as the wings rise and exhale as they sink down. And there's just a little pulse of the knees as we go. Let's do 2 more. And then inhale up. And choose which one you're going to do for the lower belly. I'm going to fold forward here. And you want to feel the earth as you squeeze. It's like being accordioned up into your tummy. So you inhale, expand those wings. As you exhale, it's like squish. And this earth energy comes up and fills the lower Dan Tian. Exhaling when the palms come toward each other. Inhaling as you open up. One more time. Then inhale. Exhale, you can bend the knees. Scoop up like you're gathering all that energy from the earth. And coming to nourish the lower Dan Tian. Pause here, breathe for a moment. And let's imagine these 3 spheres representing these energetic centers. So imagine in the cranial vault, a sphere of light. Oh, it's probably about the size of a great big grapefruit. And in the center of the chest, not where the physical heart is, but right in the middle, it's another sphere of light. Same size as that one in the cranial vault. And then down in the tummy where our hands are, below the belly button, another sphere of light. And let's practice our set one more time. So we're going to inhale and expand. And exhale and cultivate awareness on the palms. 2 more. And once more. And palms up. Inhale. Flip. Exhale. Open. Now visualizing that sphere in the cranial vault. And as you exhale, feel all of heaven coming in and nourishing that center. Again, you're not pushing, you're not forcing anything. It's very relaxed. Inhaling and exhaling. One more time. Gathering chi. Imagine that head center has become nourished and balanced and cleared. So we inhale, we open, palms out, and exhale, sit down. Now focusing on that sphere in the center of the chest. Inhale like all of nature is flowing in. Feel that middle Dan Tiens, that heart center being nourished. Okay, then inhale up. And then choose either method and gathering the earth to that lower Dan Tiens. So you inhale, expand, you sense into the earth. And you exhale, you gather, you feel that earth energy flow up and into the lower belly. And one more time. And then if you're folded over, you'll bend your knees and you'll scoop up the energy from that earth. And come up to hold the ball at the lower Dan Tiens. And feel or envision these 3 centers, the head, the heart, and the lower belly. Imagine them beautiful and shining at just the right intensity for your inner health and well-being. And please imagine that they come to rest as the same size, these 3 spheres of light. So you may notice when you practice this, sometimes one will be bigger or smaller than the other. One of these spheres might have a weird shape. And so in our practice, we just imagine using our intent. It's very simple, actually. You just say, hey, will you please be a sphere? Hey, will y'all come and please be the same size, the same intensity? Good, and then seeing that has happened, we're then going to imagine that from the upper Dan Tiens, the sphere of light in the head, floats down and merges with the sphere of light in the chest. And then this floats down and merges with the sphere of light in the lower belly. And then just feel as if your entire body and energy system have been anchored through this energy nexus at the center of gravity. Feel yourself connected to earth and sky and all of nature through this lower Dan Tiens center. And then as you're ready, gather the hands in, bringing any surplus energy from the hands, place them on the lower tummy. And then we'll gather earth and heaven. Inhale from earth, inhale from sky, smooth down the central channel. And then like tying a drawstring, tell the chi to stay in this lower center. Again, inhale. And exhale. Once more. Good. Okay, rub your palms. You can walk out your feet a little bit as you do this too. And brush the base. Comb back your hair. Let's rub the ears a little bit. You probably got some nice chi in your hand so you can get those acupoints. Ooh, what's that one for? I forget, but it's sore. This is a classic way of self-assessment actually, is you just rub reflex zones on your body and then you go, oh, that's ouch. And you look it up and you can start to assess your own holistic medicine. But anyway, what are we supposed to do then? Oh, let's grab our shoulder and just squeeze. That's nice. And grab the other one, just squeeze. That's nice. Okay, and then let's brush the crumbs. And then let's I don't wanna. And then let's make a fist, shrug it up, inhale, and drop it down. All right, let's come on back and we will learn this sequence verbally, as well as do any Q&A on that. All right. So we've got our first practice session in. I had a good time. I hope you did too. But this is the 3 Dan Tiens Qigong, 3 Dan Tiens Qigong. Would you like to share anything about your experience or any questions that you have? That would be a good way to start. And then I have a few things to transmit about it. How was that? Groovy? Okay, cool. Excellent. Janelle, go for it.
I was really thankful for the noticing of the size and the shape and how it might look different. Mine looked like, you know, that thing called bit in Tron? That's what they look like. They're like that little like bizarro angled asterisk thing. That's what they were doing. Like it literally was like, oh, that's interesting. So noticing that and like, okay, so like let's temper those little edges and see if we can make them all like somewhat uniform. That was actually really hard, which I think probably is reflective of the energy in the world in my house right now.
Yeah.
Because it's a little crazy over here. So, but it was really nice to notice that and then to have you kind of reaffirm that like, hey, if they don't look the way you want them to, then just like ask them to calm down. So I did, and that was helpful. So thank you.
Most excellent. Oh, I'm so glad that that worked. And yeah, I've found this we'll do a version of this with the chakras as well, and a slightly different version, just to give you all the fun tools I have. But I found it can be very balancing. Like sometimes we'll do a qigong and it like, wow, it opens these things up and wow, but then it opens them up and they're still all frazzled, but now they're just empowered, you know? And so it's like, oh, okay, please come to optimal resting position. Oh, and hey, your sister down here didn't get any cereal. Let's share. And two things that are cool. One thing is we do have energetic momentum. So that's where it will feel like, you're sort of trying to change it and they change slowly because we have energetic momentum. They're used to doing that. Or as we work with the energy body, they're doing that as the answer to a challenge, right? So if you don't mind my on the spot intuitive reading, right? My guess would be that your system, your soma psyche is going, wow, there's problems on every frickin' side. Someone's got to be ready to adapt to them when they come. And so your spirit body is trying to be on every side all at once. And so when the chakras or the centers or whatever we're working with are answering a question you're asking in your soma psyche, then when we just come in with a technique, they won't change all that quickly, because what's needed is we actually need to go, is this the best answer to that question? How I've been, like in our case, I relate to you in this. So this is just a guess, disregard anything that doesn't fit for you, but I would say to myself, like, wow, I've been doing this strategy for about 32 years. How has that worked out thus far? And then we can start to inquire what might be another answer to this challenge, and usually at the end of a qigong practice, the intuition is on where we can just go, oh, this would be another answer to that challenge. I'll do that. So that's one, is we have sometimes these things, they're answering challenges to the best of our ability. Thank you, little energy centers, for trying. Sheesh. But then we also get momentum in that. Well, that's how I tend to do things. Like the subtle body is like habits of our psycho-emotional being. And so, some people you'll find they've got a big old energy center up here and then little itty bitties down here, or they've got a big old one up here and then little bit itty bitties over here. And it's because they identify like, well, that's who I am. That's what it feels like to be me. And so it can be a big ask to go, okay, now just balance those out. So that's one interesting thing, because we have momentum. But the other interesting thing is that these are not gross concrete structures. And if we found the lever, they do change like that. Where you're like, hey, what, and a lot of it is about inquiry and play. So if we were to go, wow, what would it feel like if my lower Dan Tiens felt as active as my upper Dan Tiens? What would it feel like if my upper Dan Tiens felt smooth and groovy, rather than jagged and frazzled? And in that imagination, sometimes they'll just go like, oh, it would feel like this, because that's what the subtle body is. It's an experimentation with what does stuff feel like on the inside. And so sometimes if you ask in a playful mind, what would it feel like if this, it'll just do that. And you can go like, okay, let's do that now. That's who we are. That's who I am now. And so that's the technology we're playing with in Qigong. And what's really interesting, thanks for letting me riff on this for a moment. I appreciate your share. And then now is where I have to spit out the stuff that wasn't in the lesson plan, but I probably ought to have included in the lesson plan. So it goes here. But with that disclaimer, I may have just forgotten what I was going to do. Oh yeah, this is where sometimes spiritual teachers and traditions can get really annoying, because they'll say, oh, this work, it's just instantaneous. It'll happen on its own. It's spontaneous. It's not hard. And it isn't, if you can get that trick. is that the subtle body changes at the speed of thought, but it's like it's only certain thought, like you have to actually know what we're thinking, what we're inquiring, and because there is momentum. So in some traditions, like, if you hear me go off about karma yoga, that's all about momentum. It doesn't really acknowledge the instantaneous, spontaneous transformation that can happen. But other times you'll hear these like non-dual Dzogchen supposedly folks, and they'll be like, no, you change at the speed of thought. And it's like, actually, that's bullshit, dude. You are not trauma informed. And you change that at the speed of thought. Can you get trauma informed at the speed of thought right now? What question would it require you to ask? But if we embrace both of those, then I feel we've got something really neat to work with. So thanks for sharing that. Super cool. Master Jim, did you have something queued up? Were you ready to go? No. Okay, then next is Matthew. Questions or experiences or comments?
Yeah, that was great. I think that's something I was waiting for a long time, because trying to get all 3 floors to work together for me has always been, a bit of a struggle. I could just like hear Errol and so many other people that I've worked with in the past just be like, thank God that happened. Okay. I think they're really pleased right now. In the meantime, there's like this big aligning, but it kind of just felt like a flush. A storm front just passed over, but I thought somebody was banging on my door. Because the wind hit my house so loud, so that
wow.
And so I feel like I'm like right with those natural forces here now. So
cool.
That was really awesome, super cool. And I'm soaked, so there's a nice tactile aspect to that.
Winds of change are blowing.
Yeah.
Cool. I love hearing that. All right, Miko, question, comment?
Yes, I had a comment. I noticed I wasn't going to say anything, but then your answer to Janelle just inspired me, because when we were doing the expanding and then cultivating, I realized it was like feeling the pattern of like, oh yeah, that's what's been happening, because I went through this big expansive period where like all kinds of karmas were freeing up and energy was opening and all of that, and now I feel like so scattered and weird. And I'm like, oh, I need the cultivating, like I need to like bring it in. And and if it fits in right now or later, I can ask you personally. I'm like curious what that, like on like a day-to-day level, what that what types of qigong that cultivating is would be.
Okay. Yeah, cool. I think you'll get some of that throughout this course, because that's part of the full spectrumness that is my intention. So let's see what happens. And yeah, a couple things that are fun is, okay, if you put on your Ayurveda hat for a second, you got the 3 doshas, right? You got wind, like for sake of ease, wind, fire, and mud, right? These are the 3 doshas. And transformation is of the wind humor. Transformation is of the wind humor. And so what's really neat is if you do enough of that, you'll also get a wind humor disorder. Even though the transformation you were doing was benign, spiritual, necessary, epic, that's just wind, according to your subtle body, right? And so what we often need to do, that's just switching hats, although we could say it in Qigong terms, that's just what I have queued up most easily to talk about this, is then you would take the things that soothe vata, the things that soothe the wind humor, and we would know now through experience that you need to do those as much about spiritual transformation or even psychological growth as you do about, when you stand out in the wind or when you eat too much fruit or whatever else Ayurveda says deranges that. It's not it's not derangement. It's a momentary imbalance, and our spiritual change too. It's an imbalance in the right direction, but it actually imbalances those humors. So that's one way to think about it. Like in Qigong, we might think about yin and yang or kan and li, balancing these cultivation versus transformation or something like that. But it's that thing of balance, and that even our spiritual and epic and wonderful things totally imbalance us, right? Like, have you ever had a crush on someone, right? It's totally wonderful. You are totally whacked out, man. And so that's why you call your friend, and you do that self-care of like, whoa, I'm really having a lot of fantasies and I'm doing this. Am I crazy? And they're like, no, honey, you just have a crush, but you do need to go talk to your therapist about these attachment issues or something. It's like, we want this balance, right? So same thing in our Qigong, and we'll probably get some of those as we go. Maybe we'll get a report from you at the end and see if it answered your questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Tacking with a sailboat. Totally, Deborah. It's like, you got to kind of go in some weird directions to get to your goal. All right, Kat, what say thee?
So kind of my experience is a little bit personal share, but things that also just reinforce things I already know about myself. But my middle Dantian, I had no problem opening my mind, and I had no problem with my lower, and my middle one was like, no, not right now.
Yeah.
Not right now.
Yeah.
A little much, I'm a little burned out. And then also by the third round, and it's early still and I'm tired, but my muscles, oh my gosh, I was just a bazillion pounds. I mean, I was so heavy, incredibly heavy. And of course, maybe my spleen needs a little care. So that was interesting, but it brought up a question. And I know sometimes lots of different things can be true at once. So the colors and the elements relating to the Dantians, are there? I know in our lower Dantian, we get a rainbow sometimes it's white, but is it also yellow?
Yes, actually, it is also yellow. So I was going to tell you, don't worry about it. Since you said yellow, so the lower Dantian in the alchemical tradition is sometimes referred to as the golden cauldron, and this in your 5 elements. I think everybody here has had enough experience with that. I'm not going to go off into esoterica too far, but let me do a screen share too, just for S's and G's here. Okay. How do I clear like that? Clear all drawings. Okay. So the 5 elements, you'll know you've got fire, right? And then fire produces soil. It's got another character in there, but let's make my life easy and say soil. And then soil produces metal. Really hard to draw with a cursor, but you get the idea. And then metal produces water, which goes something like that. And then water produces wood. Oh, thank goodness, an easy one to draw. Okay, and then this is the creation stage of the 5 phases, just for a fun review. Okay, and then you've got in this, you can also make, probably change color so it's not too hard on the eyeballs here. You can make the control cycle of the 5 phases. Yeah, we all remember this. Okay, so that's one map, but the earlier map is one second. Draw. Okay, is fire up here, earth in the middle, excuse me, water, and then metal descending and wood ascending. Particularly today, I think I'm a little dehydrated. And so this forms the like Celtic cross of it all. I need a drink. Hold on. Okay, this forms the Celtic cross of it all. And why am I going to these great lengths? Well, because I am Lord Sifu Longwind, but to let you know, it's actually part of the fun part of that getting away from who's right is that both of these systems are totally correct in that they have advantages the other one doesn't have, right? So you can't make a neat star out of this one. And you can't get those contemplations of like, oh, fire controls metal. So if you're too depressed, what you need to do is find a spark of joy. And that, whatever it is, listening to music, if it's microdosing psilocybin, whatever, breath work, find that spark of joy and it will help to control the excessive downwardness. Like you can't do that with this Celtic cross, but this one's earlier. And when we do our inner alchemy, the idea is the fusing of these four seasonal energies, We did that in our compassion alchemy retreat, right? We did that. And in that one, we brought all five in, but there's another method where earth is the cauldron itself. Earth is the pot, and it's represented by that golden color that both represents the harmonizing aspect, but also the like royal preciosity of the thing. So when you see the Dan Tiens as golden, that's what it is. It's the golden alchemical cauldron, or in some of the texts, they call it the earth pot. And so if you're ever reading Taoist alchemical text for fun, they'll be like blah, 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 blah. And the earth pot, that's what it means. It's that version of these are four extremes in the four seasons. And then, but where do they all happen? Oh, they all happen on planet Earth. And then what we're supposed to get from that is that when we're sitting with an emotion, we're like, oh no, I feel like this. Well, where is that happening? Well, that's happening in empathetic awareness. That's your planet Earth, right? And so, well, sure, okay, lightning's striking. Well, where's that happening? Well, lightning can't hurt Gaia. And so there's this shifting of center of gravity toward a more Gaiac, like long-term. If we were in church, we'd say, the God's eye view or something like that. But it's Taoist, so it's like more of a grounded version than that makes it feel like. It's like a Gaia's eye view of thing. That's the golden earth pot. But for today, we won't be associating an element or a color with these. Yeah, there are some systems of that, but not for now. Yeah. Okay. Did we get the questions, the check-ins? That was fun for me. Shall we learn a few things about this practice? Yes. Okay. So for your purposes, call this the 3 Dan Tiens Qigong. And you level 2 folks, this is one of the ones that's on your list of stuff that you can teach now. It's not on our level 1s, folks, and of course, you attendees, you didn't get this spiel because it was in one of those instructor only classes, but here's the rules. If you think you've got it and you want to share it with a friend, you don't have to be all, bureaucratic about it. Like just share your Qigong with them as a friend. The problem only becomes if you start to claim, oh, I'm a Qigong teacher, and you haven't had any lineage authorization. And why is that a problem? Well, mostly because it's dangerous and it's culturally appropriative. That's a double whammy, isn't it? If it was one or the other, you might be able to get it. It was like, oh, here's this rain stick. That's a little culturally appropriative, but I guess it's not hurting anyone, right? But like teaching martial arts with a rain stick, you're in trouble now, bud. So so that's the thing with this. So this is why, just for those of you who aren't in that certification program, Sifu was always like, hey, if you learned something in a way that it helped you, these things are meant to help humanity. Go teach your grandma, right? But in general, I would rather have you share the stuff from the alchemical immersion, because that's a little more accessible and most of it is relatively harmless. And then this Qigong is relatively harmless too. It's just a little more complicated. And like people will go into a trance with it and stuff. And so it's here in the level 2, right? But for those of you who are doing this authorization, as you begin to do your practice teaching classes, toss it in when you've got it. If you get this one under your belt, as in your lower Dan Tiens, then start to put this in your classes if you want to. And then as you become authorized as a full instructor, start to put this in your classes if you want to. And you can call it the 3 Dan Tiens Qigong. Now I will type in the chat box the other name of this. This comes from the Bagua Shun Dao Gong. Bagua Shun Dao Gong. And I will, I'll get for you the Chinese master's name, which is not right in my head at this moment. So I'll get that for you in the break, just because it's nice to acknowledge lineage. But I learned this, I did a 100-hour Qigong training from a teacher in Sonoma named Michael Rinaldini. And this was one of the sets that he included from his teacher's lineage. And I liked it so much that I've done a lot of it and I teach it to my students. So this is the lineage, the Bagua Shun Dao Gong, where it comes to us from. And you ought to know that because the 2 famous teachers, you might want to get their book if you're bored one day, who are the Garipolis. The Garipolis. That should be in the chat. Deborah, can you not see Bagua Shun Dao Gong? Can others see that? Are you guys getting my chats? Okay, cool. So the Garipolis, I think one of them's Gary Garipoli, as fun as that is to say. Oh yeah, Michael Rinaldini. He's cool. He's got a website, look him up. He's a Taoist priest. I didn't associate with him much after that Qigong training that I took in like 2006 or something like that. I've got a couple of 100-hour trainings from 2006 that I took. But then I met with him and I thought, wow, you're a cool dude. Yeah, you're a cool dude. So, look him up, study his stuff. He's got a few little offerings as a Taoist priest. Cool. Jim might like to study with a Taoist priest around here. So not to be confused with Michael Franti, who teaches this whole other type of transformation through music. Okay, so but the Garipolis also teach this set as part of a lineage that they learned. So when I found this Qigong, I was like, wow, I never heard of this. This ain't the 8 brocades or the 5 animal frolics. But you will have some students who come to your class and go, oh, I learned this from Master so-and-so's student, so-and-so, and they called it this. And you go, well, yeah, cool. So I just want you to know what the lineage is. Most of your students will go, whoa, 3 Dan Tiens Qigong. That was neat. But it is nice to know, like, oh yeah, this school does study it and it comes from that teacher. So I'm going to get you those grandpa's names just so you have them in your notes later. But these are the Westerners. I learned this under Michael Rinaldini, and then some people have learned this through the Garipolis workshops or videos or books. They have a pretty good book, which is like interviews with Qigong masters. Kind of fun if you're in the field, this is our professional field, or vocational if you're not making money at it. So it's nice to know, like, well, what are other folks talking about? How do people frame their work? So that's kind of fun, but not required. Okay, so we're calling it the 3 Dan Tiens Qigong because that's what we use it for. Oh yeah, so your first move, in case you're taking notes and you want this in your notes, your first move is La Qi. That's LA spacebar Qi. La Qi. LA spacebar Qi. Qi in the City of Angels. Okay, and why is that there? What are you saying to me, Kat? You don't like my humor today?
LHE is maybe not what we all want.
No, you have to know the tantric yoga to be able to utilize that.
Right.
I have utilized it. Still 5 out of 10. 5 out of 10. There's some cute things there. All right. Don't get me sidetracked like that. As if it was your fault. That's a classic guru trick, though, in case you do decide to start a cult. You just take your failings and you blame them on the students. Actually, I tell you this in case you decide to not get sucked into a cult. When you see the teachers do that, that's a warning sign. And if you see me do that, queue up all your NVC and write me an email about it. Okay, so the 3 Dan Tiens Qigong, the first move is La Qi. Pulling Qi is how that translates. I don't know if I said that like 5 minutes ago when I started non-tangenting. Pulling Qi. This is a classic Qigong move. You'll see La Qi in other places. And this is a good word to know, La. It's one of the Taiji techniques to pull, La, in the martial art there. And what are we doing? You're not actually like pulling. That's not what it means. It just means this motion of like pulling the taffy. Some Western Qigong teachers call movements like this pulling the taffy, right? So it's different than our Qi ball. And this, y'all in my lineage are especially primed to benefit from this because it's not a who's right. You don't have to go like, wait, we did this and it was a Qi ball and now you're telling, yeah, it's nothing is anything, bro. We're Buddhist Qigong. Nothing is anything is the path to everything is everything. Okay, freaking great. So in this case, you're moving your hands not this high, but to keep myself on camera. And it's just to sensitize your hands, And what that's going to do is help you shift from gross orientation to subtle orientation. Shift from gross to subtle. Okay, so just to review, in this class, I'm having the premonition. I'll be using these terms a lot: gross, subtle, causal, and non-dual, because it really relates to these chakra centers. So when you're going to do Qigong, Qi means that subtle realm of our being. And when you walk into your practice or you walk into a class, usually you're not attuned so much to the subtle, unless you're on retreat or something like that, right? So people walk into your Qigong class from just getting out of the drive-thru and they didn't have time to make a pup cup, and now the doggo is mad, and so I had to run them around the track. I just made it to class. Sorry, I'm late. Okay. Y'all need La Qi. You're going to need some La Qi, because we can't get all the benefits of Qigong if we're still in the realm of things are things, right? That's the gross realm, right? Things are things. We're not going causal. Nothing is anything. But we're going, things are things. And we go, oh, maybe things are dancing. Maybe things are poetry, right? So La Qi is a swift way to shift, a swift shift, if you will, a swift shift. You're welcome, Jim. All right. So why is this? Well, if you never read Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now, here's an excuse to do it. I read it on audio a long time ago, and it's cool because he narrates it and his voice sounds like this. And you're like, what nationality are you? And I think he might be like an American or something, but he speaks like this. I've had many Zen masters, all of them cats. And just the whole damn book is like that. But in that, so optional, but it's actually quite a nice read and has a couple really cool points about the causal. But he teaches a method in there, which is classic Taoist and yogic non-dual methodology, which he says an access point to the now is to ask, is there life in my hands? You can try that right now if you want. It's like, whatever you're doing, is there life in my hands? And because there's the asking It's different than saying like, feel your hands. That like kind of gets us into that gross orientation. But when you go, is there life in my hands? Are hands chi? Do chi of hands? And for a minute, if you get to that inquiry and sensation, you'll drop into the present moment. And that's when you'll have shifted from gross into subtle, gross into subtle. Okay, why do we do this? Well, my Lama Lair explains, if you've ever seen what do they call it? The sensory motor homunculus. If you want to look up something fun, sensory motor homunculus on your break, it's an image of how sensation shows up in your brain, right? And it's a picture of this like dwarfish little being with giant hands and giant lips and some other sense organs and an itty bitty little body and then some feet on the bottom, and he's like, I'm the sensory motor homunculus. But that's because in your brain, these things have a bagillion nerves, right? And these things have a bagillion nerves. And then everybody else pales in comparison, right? And so if you really want to get present, go to where the most sensation is. And so you can start with your hands. So this is the swift shift exercise. And we do it by, is there life in my hands? Can I feel chi in my hands? But you don't even have to go, like if it's a gross oriented class, you're, hey, and now so-and-so is going to teach our yoga class. And it's like, oh no, this is Buddha yoga. Like not the brand. I don't know if they're any good or not, but like yoga specifically to have a nice ass. And you get there and everybody's been doing exercises, but you can tell they're all just still like, things are things. And I've got a schedule. Can you make this quick? Like, you won't say, hey, feel the chi in your hands. That means nothing. That's a poem that has no meaning to someone in gross orientation, right? But if you can switch to, how do the sensations in your hands change as they move in and out with your breath? Oftentimes we will fall into the present moment on accident, and then you actually will start feeling chi much more so than if you asked someone to feel the chi. So this is a quick trick, swift shift for getting to the chi orientation. Because then as you do this exercise, instead of having it be a ritualized dance from an ancient culture, which we're preserving through our sectarian practices, which is how sometimes we do qigong, and it's absolutely wrong to say something sectarian about it. Instead of that, now you're actually working with the subtle. You're doing actual qigong. You're doing pranayama. You're unlimbering your prana, your subtle body, right? So la chi first. Okay, then you do this propping the heavens. That gets you from below to above. It opens up your body. As far as I know, there's not a big intent behind this exercise. It just opens the whole thing up, kind of like propping the heavens at the beginning of the 8 brocades, opens up your whole body. But in this case, we're not thinking, oh, it's a triple warmer. Oh, it's just getting your hands from down where they were to up where they're going. Okay, and it's inhale to the collarbones, flip, exhale, and push off. Okay, that will be important for you to remember because it's different than what we have done before. That's where students sometimes get a snag, is when we do the same movements differently. Okay, so then opening, and this, as you obviously will have felt, you're opening to that upper dantian, you're connecting with heaven, you're connecting with the expanse, you're waking up that upper center. Very simple, right? Super straightforward. Okay, cool. Is there something else to say that? You may want to tell your students or yourself to keep your shoulders down as you do this. So some people will do this and they'll do it like this. Don't do that. Shoulders, elbows heavy. Shoulders and elbows heavy. It's called opening. What's called opening?
This move, the second move, once we transition.
Oh, these, I didn't learn move by move names for these except for La Chi.
Okay, gotcha.
So I can go back and try to translate the Chinese video that I have and see. But when I received this, I didn't get individual move names for them. Okay. So yeah. So call it what you will, my buddy.
Thank you.
Okay. So upper dantian, and then sometimes I call this great bird flaps its wings, but that's not its name. Unless it is, and I'm psychically intuiting it. Okay, and this one is for this middle dantian. And I often like to teach this the way I taught y'all today, which is I don't talk about dantians on the first round through, I just have them do the movement. And this is to help stay in that subtle orientation, because when we start giving enough instructions, sometimes people will constrict to try to make sure they're doing it right. And this is one of the things we can take away is that if we're thinking about doing things right, we've come into a gross orientation, right? There's a place for that. There's like a place for doing things properly, right? But we tend to over-identify with that as if we had some control, right? Like my whole spiel about like, hey, you better get out there and vote or whatever. And it's like, yes, because it's proper according to my sense of integrity. But all of the futures that we spin out that say, you can control this and this will happen if you do, and this will happen if you don't. And then into the past of like, oh, if I had just done this instead of that, you have no idea how that shit would turn out. You're just like being an inner politician and like shaming yourself and being an inner sectarian, right? So just stop with that, right? So often I'll have people sense for the whole first round. And then once they've got the motions and they won't stress out and constrict to add anything else, then I go, now this one is about connecting to the sky. Whee, connecting to the sky. Whee. Okay, this one's about connecting to the nature. Whee, connecting to the nature. Whee. This last one's about connecting to the earth. Whee, connecting to the earth. So you had, or Miko, I'm making up names. You had opening to heaven. You had great bird flaps its wings. And you had the earth bellows. Well, that was the word I was looking for earlier, because it's like, you know how the bellows for your fire? That's kind of like what these are doing, and the earth chi goes into your tummy. Okay. Then, so those first two are pretty straightforward, right? Shoulders down, elbows down, you'll be doing it just fine. This one, bend your knees as you come down, straighten up a little as you come up, and then you've got your two versions. So you've got into the dantian, right? And once you start doing this with intent, the open part is where you're sensing into the earth. And then as you come in, you gather that sense of things into the center. So sensor and center. Then this one is really fun because this is as I was taught it, this is the full version of that exercise. And what's really neat is it's putting a strain on your kidney meridian and your kidney, the palace of the kidneys in the lower back. So the Qigong itself is toning up these muscles on the muscular level, and that actually activates these yin channels in here. So as you do this, you're not only, you're strengthening, according to Taoist physiology, like the structure that makes this lower dantian work right. But as you experiment with this, you may feel like, I feel that one much more than I feel this standing up one energetically, which is really weird, because usually when you put your body into some, kung fu pose, and then you're like, okay, now meditate, freaking hard. But in this one, you're like holding your spine up aloft in space, and your back of your legs are working, and there's all this chi like coming up through the legs. So I don't know, some yogi was really clever back in the day to have figured that out. But so that's how that one works. And the same thing, although my hands don't come to my belly, it's like a chi bellows. And as they come together, it's like the earth energy goes whoosh, whoosh. Yeah, makes sense. Did that description kind of match your experience of the exercise a little bit? Okay, and then at the end, you scoop up and you bring the earth energy up to that lower belly center in the holding the ball meditation posture. Clear? Any questions on the just logistical instructions on the form? Gives you enough to practice when you can go back and watch the video and etc. Okay, so what I'd like to do, I think we'll take lunch 1:30 to 2:30. So our class, and then we'll come back 2:30 to 5:30. And that's our day. What a quick day. It's going so fast already. So let's do just a little download on your 3 Dan Tiens centers. This is really to help round out your understanding as a Qigong practitioner. So let me get my little whiteboard. What a mess. Okay, so the 3 Dan Tien. All right, so let's talk first about why in this Qigong, you'll remember that, get my gallery view so I can look at y'all. At the end, we scoop up and then we hold the ball at the lower Dan Tien. And then the way I teach this exercise is at the very end, you take the upper Dan Tien, you merge it with the middle Dan Tien, you merge everything down into the lower Dan Tien. So let's talk about this. Lower Dan Tien is the starting place in Taoist inner alchemy. Lower Dan Tien is the starting place in Taoist inner alchemy. So in some schools, even this Qigong, like where we're focusing on this upper and middle center, like that would be revealing esoteric things. How did you get access to knowing there's an upper Dan Tien? Sifu just made me breathe in my tummy for 15 years. That's valid. The reason for this, you got to know if you're going to be an intermediate Qigong teacher, and you ought to know for your own practice. I think the reason for this is because Taoist training wants to build you like a pyramid. You've heard me say this before, I think. It wants to build you like a pyramid. So the top of you is a little antenna to the celestial realms. And then the bottom of you is as stable as humanly possible. You're like the most stable geometric structure around. So everything starts with that lower Dan Tien, because if you started with these upper centers, you become top heavy. You become top heavy. And as we learned through Kat's expertly timed question, this lower Dan Tien is considered to be the earth pot. It is the earth pot. And that earthy harmonizing energy is related to being able to alchemize all of the different elements together and to create this like stabilized, harmonized, this lower belly center is related to the womb. Well, how obviously, right? So much so that certain mystics in various traditions over the years said it's harder for people without wombs and people who are identified as men to complete the alchemy, because they have to create a Dan Tien, whereas people who are born with wombs have one already there for them to start working with. They already have a somatic anchor and the feeling of like, what would it be like to nourish a being inside your little tummy? Look at those doggies. Oh, they're so cute. Wow. Okay, that wakes up my empathic center. So the lower Dan Tien is not more important or less important than the others. It's where you start in Taoist training. So when you see in Tai Chi training, when for years and years, they just, all they'll tell you is focus on that lower Dan Tien in the martial arts tradition. Well, okay, because that's where you start. They want you strong and stable. And then in exercises like this, right, you pull up from the earth and you stay there, right? You don't pull up from the earth and then meditate here and then meditate here and then meditate here. You stay there. because this center is the most important starting place. The other thing to know about that, perhaps for your notes, is that this lower center is related to your personal sense of embodiment, right? So as a self, as an ego, as an I amness, that's all centered in this lower tummy, your personal sense of embodiment. And so one of the things we will find in spiritual training, there is, like in Tibetan yoga, you start with Om Ah Hum, right? And they don't actually teach you the So and the Ha of your lower centers, which is the full mantra. They just teach you Om Ah Hum, sometimes for the rest of your life. And the idea behind that is that the sense is we are gross identified enough. We have enough of a sense of I am, me, that they want to catapult you out of that. And so they wake up head, heart, and throat, and they vibrate those and they visualize those and they get you going. But one of the problems with that can be, as we have observed in spiritual communities in modern times, is that you can wake up this heart, you can wake up to non-duality and then be a sexual abuser. Pardon me, I probably should have done a content warning about that. But we know this, right? In these cult kind of things, is like some of these spiritual teachers, this is not spreading gossip, this is just spreading information, like Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, for example. One of the most famous tantric Buddhist teachers in the world, prolific, or in the West at least, prolific, and he wrote some great books. And he was a famous alcoholic and womanizer, and his community became highly abusive. This is just documented. And then passed that behavior on to successive regents, like the top leaders in the community, doing gnarly, gnarly stuff. And it's not my place to judge, well, what chakras were developed or whatever. But as an example, you can have really open upper centers tuning into non-dual realities and still have real breaches in ethics through not working on how your personal embodiment is happening, that lower center. So, and it's not to say the Taoists have done better with this, but in the theory of the internal alchemy, they say start with how you show up. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? And so that's represented by this lower Dan Tiens. Yeah. So Tantra teachers, Tantra is one of these things because, what is Tantra? It's opening to that non-dual experience. And there is really a non-dual experience that you can open to, but then what they feel is that invalidates duality, like all aspects. And it's like they're putting non-dual against duality and thus creating a new dualism. And so hopefully it doesn't go too wacko for the morning, but like you can't have a non-duality that doesn't also embrace duality, or it would be incomplete. And so that should put your mind on the fritz. And then if you can't possibly explain what you feel, that's close to experiencing the non-dual state. Okay, so let's run through the Dan Tiens. So you've got your lower Dan Tien, and that's the old LD, and it is related to, of the three powers, this is related to earth. This is related to earth of the three powers in traditional Taoism. And this is not to be confused with the soil element in the 5 elements. You could kind of call those like the horizontal seasonal elements. Heaven, earth, and nature are the 3 powers, and they're like a vertical relationship in Taoist training. You could think of them as earth is gross, heaven is causal, and nature is subtle. So these are the 3 powers in Taoist training. So your lower Dan Tien is created to the power of the 3 great powers of earth, And it's related to cultivating Jing, which if you look at the various Taoist manuals in English, Jing has a lot of different meanings, right? It has a meaning in alchemical terminology, and it has a meaning in Taoist sexual practice. For how I would like to encourage you to use this, think of Jing as, our slogan in the temple style lineage, dignified embodiment. Dignified embodiment. So this lower Dan Tiens center is going to be your center of cultivating dignified embodiment. I like that term because it just cuts through to the heart of, what I want to know is not, okay, well, how did this sect do it versus that sect? And how does it relate to something in Sanskrit? That's all fun. But what I really need to know is, how do you practice with this? And how do you practice with this in a way that leads to demonstrable results? So the lower Dan Tiens, this center in your body, this feeling center in your body, lends itself toward the cultivation of dignified embodiment. Such as, if you wanted to spiritually feel like a pyramid, yeah, or feel like, if you've ever sat meditation and you finally get the seat, like you're in a longer meditation retreat, and like first day, you're like, oh, fuck, this sucks. And then somehow you do the right stretch in the morning or something, and you sit and the body just goes, and it just parks itself there. That's this kind of sense of dignified. It's stable. It's supported and self-supporting. It's tensegritus or something like that. So dignified embodiment. And those are the earth and Jing and dignified embodiment. I think that's all I want you to know for now. Okay, let's do the middle Dan Tiens. MD. And so this is going to be related to nature of the three powers of heaven, earth, and nature. This one is related to nature, and it's related to your chi, which in our course today, you could also say is related to the subtle, right? The chi and the subtle. And in temple style lingo, you could say this is about cultivating open-hearted compassion. Open-hearted compassion. And we know this, right? Because when we feel that, we feel it in this heart center, right? Very rarely, very rarely do people go like, oh, I got so much sympathy for you. Oh, yeah. No, except at that Tantra retreat, Deborah was mentioning, right? Wow, I relate. Yes. No, don't do that. That's incongruous. It's incongruous. We go, oh, honey. Because we feel it right in here. We feel it right in here. Okay. Thanks for letting me get my the only outlet I have for my drama nerd, aside from joking with my partner. Thanks for that. Okay, so open-hearted compassion, and then let's do the upper Dan Tiens. And this is related to heaven. In our Taoist cosmology, it's not the Christian heaven, as far as I know. And this is related to the cultivation of Shen, and that in our terminology for the temple style lineage is lucid wakefulness. Lucid wakefulness, right? And so you can also see this in body language, right? You don't go, wow, I had that cup of coffee and I just feel so present. No, usually like we do it like, wow, man, that meditation, like I just dropped all concepts. And I was like, I could see through, whatever it is. So this is lucid wakefulness. And this is the center that we'll use to awaken higher capacities. So I wanted to give you this little download, because you'll see this in traditional Taoist work. This is kind of like the code book in the back, right? If you're trying to read some of these texts, some of them make perfect sense. It's like you're reading those Rumi poems. Okay, Coleman Barks made up half of the translations, but some of them you read and you go like, whoa, you got something there. I know exactly what that means. And like, it's true. And then other times you're reading Taoist texts and you're like, what are you talking about? And because you need a little code book to understand what the heck they're talking about. So this is my aim at giving you a code book. And even if you don't do that, then now what you do is you take this into your practice and you can bring some of this meaning. I don't suggest like trying to teach this in a Qigong class, open attendance, but as you're practicing, you're expanding, like, what is heaven energy in my understanding of the Tao? Oh, and I'm bringing this in and I'm feeling that cultivates lucid wakefulness. Oh, right. And so you just have this kind of like subtle, mild intentionality with your practices that you can bring in as you get these layers of meaning. Okay, Miko, question, comment? Miko?
Yes, I had a
Yeah.
question about heaven, because you were talking about the distinction of the Taoist view of heaven versus Christian. And I don't think I'm working with the Christian view of heaven, but and as you were saying, like feeling, what is heaven to the Tao? My feeling and experience and how I relate to it is like, it's like the universe, the cosmos, the great mystery unknown. And I was wanting to know what's the like proper Taoist, not proper meaning like there's a right or wrong, but just general, like how it would be thought of through Taoism.
Yeah. Great, because this will also answer Deborah Dove's question from the chat. So how nice. So heaven in like religious Taoism can be very similar to like a Christian or a Buddhist heaven, right? It is the realm of the spirits and like the good place. So if we're speaking in traditional, cultural appreciation and understanding in terms of religious Taoism, which isn't necessarily alchemical Taoism or mountain Taoism, then we should know that sometimes heaven does refer to that. But for us, basically, very simply, before lunch conversation is think of it as causal in our three realms, right? So gross, subtle, and causal. Heaven is causal. And let's do this by learning the Chinese character, because I have to do it for the middle one too. So heaven looks like this. Heaven looks like this. Okay. And in some of the traditional Taoist meditation on this, this bottom character, this part is a person. This part is a person. And it's like an old stick figure, right? Like if we were like, right? Like, oh, it's a person. Got it. So this is the stylized hieroglyph stick figure from ancient China. And then this line, this straight line is E, means number one, number one. And so one of the classic presentations on heaven is they say, when a human embraces the one, they become great. So this character is Da, is great. When a human embraces the one, they become great. When greatness embraces the one, it's the universal, something like that. And so what this is a picture of in the olden days, it's very shamanic, prehistoric, is a person going like this. This is what the word great is a picture of, is somebody going, really big, it's really big, right? And then above them is the plane of the sky. That's what that's an old-timey picture of, right? A really big sky, a really big sky. But in traditional non-dual Taoist philosophy, this number 1 is actually meant to be, they explain it as it's 0, the non-dual great unity. But because we can't talk about or understand the non-dual great unity, you take that donut, that bagel, and you open it up. So it has a yin and a yang. And that's what we call the one. The one. So hopefully this isn't going too far into wildness, but this would be what we call non-dual. And then this would be what we call causal. Causal. So that's heaven in yogic alchemical Taoist tradition. And you could say a couple of poems about that might be the sphere of all creative possibility. That's the poem I like in this very moment the most. The sphere of all creative possibility is heaven. So in tradition, we would sometimes in certain schools tap into like, oh yeah, your benign ancestors are up there, and the guardians of the lineage are up there, which is kind of the same as saying benign ancestors. And that is one way of relating to heaven. This is also in like medical Qigong alchemical traditions. This is also the energies of the stars and the sun and moon. That's considered heaven. And so there are techniques by which you would visualize those lights coming and filling this center. But as I'm teaching the class today, what I really want you to focus on is that aspect of the causal, which is where non-dual, like the aspect of non-dual where it's just everything is everything, where that moves into creative, anything could be anything. That's heaven. That's heaven. Because like, okay, and then let's bring it back, because like the Christian tradition, okay, I'm going to say something opinionated. Just put on your opinion ears. Christian tradition is a very debased version nowadays of its original esoteric intent, which is a yogic tradition. But we do need to step things down so we can think about them. But the idea is, think about like, if Jesus were up there and you could talk to her, right? Because anybody born from a immaculate conception would be biologically female. So Jesus is like the first explicitly trans man in the Bible. Anyway, if you could talk to him, I guess that's his chosen pronoun, although I'm not sure anybody asked in the Bible. Isn't that what you would want them to say? Like your spiritual friend is like, anything could be anything. It's all possible for you, Miko. Wow. And they just marvel at the possibilities. That's heaven. That's heavenly, bro. Okay, so then that's great, because what we need is that if you do too much of that, you're gonna be wigging out, bro. That's a little much. And so we also need earth, which is dignified embodiment, right? As you embody, wow, anything's possible, cool. And this is more like, well, what's possible amongst these conditions, right? I've got a bunch of donkey shit, but I don't have enough wood chips to start to feed the mycorrhiza in that denatured compacted soil out and back. But I really want to start recharging aquifers. So what's possible with these conditions? Oh, I could call the woodworker down the street. Oh, I could sign up for chipdrop.com. And then I could give away some of this donkey shit and teach others how to recharge aquifers by creating a better microbiome in the soil so that the soil is not compacted or whatever. That would be dignified embodiment, right? Anything is possible, but this is what's happening. And so in light of what's happening, what's possible here? Okay, then that should feel like compassion. If you get those two together, that'll feel like compassion, right? Like, oh, we can recharge an aquifer. What would be the kindest way I could encourage myself to do that? So then this word nature that we should look at is that's not a good translation of what the actual Taoism is. The middle Dantian in the three powers is related to humanity, right? So that's just a picture of a person. I did a worse job than I did up there. And the Chinese word is yuan, which nowadays I think they spell with a ara, but in the olden days they sometimes spelled with a J, because it's a yuan. It's not a it's a yuan. And so that means humanity. But the reason I say nature nowadays is because how it's supposed to feel. If you're in Qigong class and you're like, now feel energy from all of humanity coming into your heart, people are going to be like, oh God, oh no, oh God, humanity, what the hell? So, and so I say nature because that's what it's supposed to feel like. So in these, I'm going to stop the share so I can look at you easily. The feeling of heaven in our practice, the feeling of heaven is like vertical up. The feeling of earth is like vertical down. And the feeling of human is horizontal, Okay, and that's what you'll feel in these Dan Tiens centers as they sort of wake up and do their jobs. It's like, as this one wakes up, you're like, pew, I'm off to the non-dual. See you later. I'll deal with climate change tomorrow. Goodbye. That's too easy for me. Okay, so then the earth, if you really activate that, you'll be like, whoa, am I underground? It just goes down and down and down and within. Oh. And this one, if you activate it, it goes, psh. Fuck, dude, we're all in this together. We're all in this together. And then if you imagined that there were other beings who are having that experience and you drew that in, then you would be contacting the power of what's called humanity. The trick is that most people are not, okay, I'm going to share a bias with you. My karma may be blinding me. Doesn't seem like most people are really being humans. They're being animals, or they're being ignorant gods, or they're being tyrant titans, or they're being hungry ghosts or something like that. But when they say human, they mean we're all in this together. And that is the experience of the subtle, because the subtle is nothing but relationship. Nothing but relationship. So the causal is the underlying unity of all being. The gross is the apparent diversity of all being. And the subtle is the dancingness that harmonizes those two opposites. It's groovy, dude. It's so groovy. So then let's go to lunch. Let me tell you the final capstone statement, and then we'll get out of here and we can do the rest when we come back. But can you see why you need to cultivate these in balance, right? Because like, let's say you didn't have heart, but you had these two, you'd be toggling back and forth like I do. I'll just admit, between like, oh, dude, it's all one. Oh, fuck, it's all separate. Oh, man, but bliss is possible. But you know what else is possible? Suffering. You know, and so if you're a Qigong, if I came to you, I was your Qigong student, I was like, what do I do? You go like, well, it's time for you to cultivate compassion. That would be the type of yogic practice to basically fix the torture that you're putting yourself through. And then similarly, people are like, I can love so easily, but I'm being bogged down by the suffering of others. And you go like, well, no, dude, you need to spiritually bypass. You need to learn benign spiritually bypassing, right? because you don't have any of the unity. You have all the diversity and you can feel it really well, but there's no like hope in there. There's no transcendence, right? And then you have other people who are like, oh, none of this is real. If we just open our hearts, then, you know, no one can vaccinate you and it'll be fine because your heart's open. And it's like, okay, you might, you know, need to get your feet back on the ground. Unless you can actually show me how you can levitate, like, I don't believe any of this. Like, let's go to Missouri, the show me state, and let's see how that works out, you know. And so you get that kind of like that solipsism thing. It feels right on the inside, like a poem feels right on the inside, but it's out of touch with observable life, real life. At least 1/3 of your life is this stuff, right? So we got to cultivate them in balance. And this is why this Taoist tradition is really just wonderful, because it says that from the outset. And the 3 Dan Tiens is nice because it's a little simpler than having to do all 7 chakras to figure that out. They have to be in balance. So you just got the big 3. And maybe we can talk about that more when we come back. You know, like what's the difference between those systems? They actually do harmonize, at least in the Tibetan system. But this is our intro. How are we doing? Fun? Is the pacing good? Is the pacing better than the new Disney, Marvel, and Star Wars shows that they try to put out? You know, we're doing good. Okay, cool. So when we come back, we'll finish up our Dan Tien convo and we'll start working on root chakras. Oh yeah. So it's 1:33. Please come back at 2:33 or 33 past the hour in an hour where you are. And I really love you. I hope you have a great lunch. This is my favorite thing to do in the world. So thanks for giving me a chance to do it. I'll see you soon.